It was meant to be just another headline interview. A studio, 2 chairs, bright lights, nothing unusual. But when Donald Trump sat across from Katie Couric, the air itself seemed to change. There was a stillness, the kind that comes right before something unforgettable. Cameras rolled. Producers whispered in headsets. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Katie smiled, polite but razor-sharp. "Mr. Trump, thank you for being here." He leaned back, adjusting his tie with that familiar confidence. "Always a pleasure, Katie. People love when I talk. Ratings go up every time." The audience chuckled softly. But behind those laughs was curiosity, even fear. Everyone knew Couric didn't do soft interviews, and Trump never backed down. For the first 10 minutes, it looked like a normal conversation. She asked about policies, plans, leadership. He answered smoothly, throwing in jokes, charm, and the occasional jab at fake news. Then, it happened. The question that cracked the calm. "Mr. Trump, you've made a lot of statements that fact-checkers say are false. Do you believe you have a problem with the truth?" The room froze. Trump's smile vanished. His eyes narrowed, a man who'd heard that question one too many times. "I don't have a problem with the truth," he snapped. "I have a problem with fake news twisting everything I say. You people take things out of context. You lie." Couric didn't blink. "But these aren't opinions, sir. They are facts, verified numbers, documents, quotes." The silence grew thick, like a pressure building under glass. Trump leaned forward, hands spread. "Katie, I've built an empire. Created jobs. Made history. You think a few reporters with notepads know more than me?" Couric met his gaze, steady as steel. "I think truth isn't a competition, Mr. Trump. It's a standard." The crew stopped moving. Even the cameras seemed to tremble. Trump's jaw tightened. His tone hardened. "No, Katie, the problem is you people think you own the truth. But you don't. The American people see through it." Every sentence felt like a punch. Couric's voice softened, but her words cut deeper. "So you're saying facts are optional now?" Trump laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I'm saying I know more than the people who pretend to know everything. Big difference." The temperature in the studio rose. The tension was palpable, a battle of control, ego, and power playing out under blinding lights that no one knew it then. But this was only the beginning. The moment would spiral into one of the most explosive interviews ever aired. And before it was over, one of them would stand up and walk out. The air inside the studio had changed. The temperature felt higher, the silence heavier. What began as a polished interview was starting to sound more like a trial, and Katie Couric was the prosecutor. Across from her, Donald Trump sat back in his chair, jaw clenched, eyes locked. Every light, every camera, every heartbeat was aimed right at him. "Mr. Trump," Katie began again, "many of your claims have been proven false by independent sources, economists, historians, even members of your own administration. Why do you continue repeating them?" Trump smiled, but it wasn't his usual confident grin. It was sharper, thinner. "Katie, those so-called sources are biased. They've always been against me. I don't lie, I correct lies. The difference is, when I speak, the truth hurts people who don't want to hear it." The audience behind the glass exchanged glances. Couric stayed calm, unshaken. "But facts aren't emotional, Mr. Trump. They are measurable. If data contradicts you, do you still call that fake news?" Trump leaned forward now, voice rising just a touch. "Katie, you're twisting things again. These people, the so-called experts, they've been wrong about everything. I built an empire. I won elections. I know how the real world works, not just what's written on paper." Couric tilted her head slightly, curious, but firm. You talk about the real world. But the real world also deals in consequences. Don't you think words have weight, especially when millions believe them? Trump's eyes narrowed. You mean when millions believe me? That's not a problem, Katie. That's called leadership. Her tone softened, but only to sharpen the impact. Or is it influence without accountability? The silence that followed was piercing. Even the sound engineers stopped adjusting their dials. Trump laughed, short, defensive. That's your trick, isn't it? You ask loaded questions, then act innocent when I call you out. You people in the media, you pretend to search for truth, but all you want is drama. Couric didn't flinch. Drama doesn't create itself, Mr. Trump. People's reactions do. For a moment, he froze. His expression hardened. The tension between them could have snapped glass. Katie's face stayed calm, but her eyes carried something deeper, conviction. Trump's face, though composed, carried something else, irritation, maybe fear. Let's talk responsibility, she said finally. When misinformation spreads under your name, when your words inspire anger, do you accept any part of that? Trump's tone sharpened. No. I'm not responsible for what other people do. I speak the truth. If people twist it, that's on them. Not me. But leadership, Katie replied, means owning the influence that comes with your words. Leadership means fighting lies, he shot back. And I've fought them better than anyone. You call it misinformation, I call it honesty that scares you. The room went silent again. This wasn't about data anymore. It was about control, of truth, of narrative, of the spotlight. And as the questions grew tougher, Trump's patience grew thinner. Every answer became shorter, sharper, more defensive. Katie Couric had found the crack, and she wasn't going to let it close. The cameras were still rolling, but the energy had changed. The tension wasn't hidden anymore. It was visible in every breath, every glance, every word. Donald Trump leaned back, one hand gripping the armrest, the other gesturing sharply. His voice was still controlled, but his eyes weren't. You know, Katie, this is exactly what I expected, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You bring me here to talk policy, then twist it into another hit job. Same old story. Couric didn't flinch. She sat straight, calm, the perfect balance of empathy and edge. I'm just asking the questions people deserve answers to, Mr. Trump. No, you're repeating the same nonsense the media's been saying for years, he snapped. You don't want answers, you want sound bites. The crew looked uneasy. This wasn't debate anymore. It was something else, something raw, unpredictable. Katie glanced down at her notes, then set them aside completely. Her next words came slowly, clearly, like a scalpel cutting through the noise. You've built a brand on strength, on always being right. But strength isn't the same as truth. Can you admit that? The question hung in the air like a dare. Trump's smile returned, but it was the smile of a man under fire. Katie, people love me because I am right. Because I say what others are too afraid to say. The truth makes weak people uncomfortable, and you're proving that right now. The audience watching through glass monitors could feel it, the heat of a battle between two worlds. Couric was unshakable. Trump was unraveling, inch by inch. So honesty, she said, is whatever you decide it is. Trump leaned forward, voice rising. Honesty is about results. I built things. I fixed things. I made America stronger. You think words are truth? I think actions are. Katie nodded slightly. Then why do so many of your own words contradict your actions? That was the hit. The one that landed. Trump's face hardened. His voice cracked, just for a second. You're twisting everything again. You take one sentence, one moment, and act like you know everything about me. You don't. The control he'd held so tightly for years was slipping. The air buzzed with tension, electric and dangerous. In that studio, under those lights, something rare was happening. A man who had built his empire on dominance was losing control. Not because of attack, but because of calm. Katie Couric wasn't fighting back. She didn't need to. Every second she stayed quiet made the silence louder than his shouting. "You see?" Trump said, pointing across the table. "This is why people hate the media. You don't want conversation. You want confrontation." "Sometimes," Couric replied softly, "confrontation is conversation, when truth is at stake." Trump blinked. For the first time, he didn't have a quick comeback. And that's when everyone watching realized. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was exposure. The armor had cracked. And the man behind it was starting to show. The studio lights seemed brighter now. Every glare, every flicker of the cameras reflected off Trump's face, a mix of pride, fury, and disbelief. He wasn't just answering questions anymore. He was fighting for control. Katie Couric leaned forward slightly, her voice low, precise, deliberate. "Mr. Trump, you've said you value strength. But strength isn't shouting the loudest, it's standing by the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Can you do that here, tonight?" Trump's shoulders stiffened. He let out a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You love these little speeches, don't you, Katie? You act like you're the moral compass of America. But I know what you're doing, this is a trap." Her tone stayed steady. "There's no trap, Mr. Trump. Just questions you don't like." The words hit like bullets. Trump leaned forward now, his voice louder, faster. "No, it's not about liking or disliking. It's about respect. You don't respect me. You never did. You people, the so-called media, you've been after me since day one." Couric didn't interrupt. She didn't even blink. She just let him speak, and that silence made him angrier. "I've accomplished more than anyone sitting in these studios ever will. I rebuilt industries, created jobs, saved money, and what do I get? Accusations. Lies. Always lies." He slammed his hand lightly on the table. Not hard, but enough to make the microphones pick up the sound. The crew froze. Even the air felt heavier. "I came here in good faith," he continued. "But you're twisting every word I say. This isn't journalism, Katie. It's an ambush." Couric spoke softly, but her tone carried weight. "No, Mr. Trump. It's accountability." That single word hung in the air like thunder. Trump's jaw tightened. He looked around, as if searching for someone, a friendly face, a lifeline. There was none. For the first time that night, his legendary confidence cracked. Not completely, but just enough for the audience to see it. "You think you're better than me," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly. "You sit there behind your questions pretending you're honest. But you're not. None of you are." Couric shook her head slowly. "This isn't about me, Mr. Trump. It's about truth, something you say you value. But truth doesn't bend to ego." Trump stood up abruptly. The sound of his microphone cable snapping loose echoed through the room. "I'm not going to sit here and be insulted. I've had enough of this." He straightened his jacket, his face red, his breathing sharp. Couric remained seated, her voice steady, clear, unwavering. "You can leave if you want, Mr. Trump. But walking away doesn't change the questions, or the answers." That line hit like lightning. The audience didn't move. The world seemed to stop. This was it, the breaking point. The exact second when composure gave way to chaos, and ego shattered under the weight of truth. And as the cameras captured every frame, one thing became clear. History wasn't being made through speeches or slogans. It was being made through silence, confrontation, and the courage not to back down. The cameras kept rolling. But no one in the studio dared to breathe. Donald Trump was standing now, shoulders squared, face red with anger, eyes blazing under the glare of the studio lights. Across from him, Katie Couric sat perfectly still, hands folded, gaze steady. Two worlds. Two forces. Colliding on live television. "You've crossed a line, Katie," Trump said, his voice shaking between fury and disbelief. "You bring me here to talk policy, but all you want is a fight. That's why the media's dying. You don't tell stories, you push agendas." Couric didn't move. Her tone was calm, too calm. "I don't push agendas, Mr. Trump. I ask questions. Tough ones. The kind that real leaders answer." The studio was dead silent. Even the production crew looked frozen behind the cameras. This wasn't a conversation anymore, it was a duel. Trump's voice rose, his words sharp and fast. "You think you're tough? I've dealt with tougher people than you. Presidents. CEOs. World leaders. They respected me, because they knew I'd tell it like it is." "And yet," Couric said quietly, "you can't handle being questioned by a journalist." The line hit like thunder. The audience behind the glass gasped. Trump's jaw tightened, then he laughed, short and bitter. "You see? That's the problem with your world. You confuse confrontation with courage." Couric's eyes didn't leave him. "And you confuse control with truth." That was the breaking point. Trump stepped back from the chair, yanking off his microphone. The wire snapped loose with a hiss. "I'm done," he barked. "This isn't journalism, it's a witch hunt. You can sit there with your fake notes and smug attitude, but I'm not playing your game." He turned toward the exit, his movements sharp, furious, deliberate. Every step echoed through the studio like a countdown. Couric called after him, her tone soft, almost sorrowful. "Walking away doesn't make you right, Mr. Trump. It just makes you afraid to be wrong." He stopped, just for a second. His back to her, his hand on the door. The world seemed to freeze in that one moment, the entire room suspended between pride and consequence. Then he pushed the door open and walked out. The echo of it, that single door slam, was louder than any word spoken that night. Narrator tone slows, emotional. The cameras stayed on Couric. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply looked into the lens, and spoke the line that would replay across every screen in America. "Well, that's one way to end an interview." The crew exhaled. The silence broke. And then, applause. Not thunderous, not mocking, just stunned. Within hours, the clip exploded online. #Trump walks out trended across every platform. Millions watched. Millions debated. Some cheered his defiance. Others praised her composure. But one thing everyone agreed on. They had just witnessed something historic. Because that night, it wasn't about politics. It was about pride. And the moment a man who built his legacy on strength couldn't stand the weight of his own words. The door had slammed shut. But the sound didn't fade, it echoed. Through the studio. Through the city. Through the world. By sunrise, that moment, Trump walking out on Katie Couric, had already become headline news. The clip was everywhere. CNN called it the most explosive political interview of the decade. Fox News called it a setup from the start. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all burning with debate. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a side. In New York, news anchors replayed the footage frame by frame, dissecting his words, her tone, the way his hand trembled before he ripped off the mic. In London, morning shows debated whether it was political theater or a psychological unraveling. And in millions of American living rooms, families watched in silence, replaying that last line from Couric. "Walking away doesn't make you right. It just makes you afraid to be wrong." That quote became legend overnight. Printed on t-shirts, turned into memes, remixed into dramatic TikToks. But behind the noise, something deeper was happening, something human. People weren't just reacting to a fight. They were reacting to what it revealed. Trump's supporters flooded social media, fierce, loyal, unwavering. He didn't walk out, he stood up. They ambushed him. She's just another puppet for the media. But for others, that walkout meant something else entirely. He couldn't handle truth when it wasn't his own. That interview showed who he really is, not the brand, not the showman, but the man. Cable panels turned it into a spectacle. Psychologists broke down body language. Journalists debated ethics. Was Carrick too harsh? Was Trump too fragile? Or had America just seen power stripped bare? Narrator tone deepens, cinematic. Inside the network that aired the interview, the mood was surreal. The control room team, still replaying the footage, realized they had captured lightning, the kind of unscripted moment that defines careers and divides nations. Katie Couric refused interviews for days. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence said enough. Trump's team released a statement that night. President Trump was disrespected by a biased journalist who twisted facts. He walked out because he refuses to participate in dishonest media theatrics. But that didn't stop the storm, it fed it. Because for every person who defended him, two more asked the same question. If you can't handle questions, how can you handle truth? And that's when it became clear, this wasn't about one interview anymore. It was about something much larger. A conversation America had been avoiding for years. About power. About pride. About truth itself. Because in that single moment, caught on camera and broadcast around the world, one thing became undeniable. Even the strongest voices can crack when faced with quiet honesty. Days turned into weeks, but the echo of that moment refused to fade. What started as a routine interview had become a mirror, showing America something it didn't want to see. Across talk shows, newsrooms, and kitchen tables, people still argued about it. Some called it disrespect. Others called it truth. But everyone called it unforgettable. Because for once, the world had watched a man who built his image on control lose it. And a journalist who built her career on composure keep it. Beat pause. When Donald Trump walked out of that studio, he didn't just leave an interview, he left behind a question that still lingers. Is power measured by how loud you speak, or by how well you listen? Katie Couric's words, calm, unshaken, echoed long after the cameras cut. Walking away doesn't make you right. It just makes you afraid to be wrong. That line became more than a quote. It became a symbol of accountability, of courage, of what journalism was always meant to be. History will remember the walkout not for its chaos, but for its clarity. In that moment, millions realized something profound, that truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs to stand its ground. And in a world built on noise, silence can still win. So whether you saw it as a fight, a failure, or a revelation, one thing is certain. That night changed the way people saw interviews forever. Not because of who stormed out, but because of who stayed. If this story made you stop and think, even for a moment. White right pointing backhand index, hit subscribe so you never miss the stories that expose power, reveal truth, and remind us what real conversation sounds like. Speech balloon comment below. Who do you think showed more strength that night? Trump or Couric? Let's hear your thoughts. Because truth isn't decided by headlines. It's decided by people who keep watching till the end.